happy Memorial Day weekend. We want to celebrate and remember those brave Americans, those brave men and women who gave their life for our precious, precious freedom. Climbing cliffs is committing to the path of greatest resistance, resulting in the greatest glory. When we allow courage to really penetrate our heart of hearts, we allow ourselves and commit ourselves to walking the path of greatest resistance, but also resulting in the greatest glory. I can't help but remember this really great story of courage that comes from World War II. Now, it's 1944, and the Allies are landing in Arezzo, Italy, and their objective is to break through the German lines and get to Rome. And this would be the first Axis capital to fall. And so this would be a significant momentum shift in the war. Now, this trying to establish a beachhead here in Italy was a ferocious battle. It was a battle of attrition for the good guys. There were 800 men a day being lost in this initial surge, in this establishing the beachhead. And the objective was to move forward and disrupt the German line and push straight to Rome. So 28-year-old Sergeant Sylvester Antolak and his unit was a part of the spearhead to lead the 3rd Infantry Division to break out of the beachhead and penetrate the Germans' defensive lines and open up a way for the good guys to get to Rome. Now, beyond the Arezzo beachhead was a key strategic city of Sylvester, Italy. Once there were a lot of directions the Allied forces could go and burst out of the confinement of the beach area. So Sergeant Antolak's platoon was the first sent out that day. Now, on the morning of May 24th, 1944, the platoon made it to a railroad embankment outside the city of Sylvester. After a fierce battle from the night before, the men recouped, momentarily protected from undercover. Antolak was the squad leader of about 10 men under his command. They were preparing to advance into the teeth of the German defenses. Now, the Germans had machine gun firing points scattered all throughout the area. So the first squad was ordered to advance from behind the railroad embankment into an open field, and as soon as they got out, they were exposed, and they immediately came under fire and got pinned down. The second squad must provide support by advancing directly into machine gun fire. Sergeant Antolak was disadvantaged but responsible for his fellow soldiers. Something had to be done. And there comes a moment when we have to make a decision, right? It's now or never. And this was that moment for Sergeant Antolak. This time was a defining moment for him. With resolve and unbelievable courage, Antolak charged to shock the enemy. Making himself a target, he drew all the machine gun fire so the men on the field could be saved. This advance was nearly 200 yards in an open field. And as he went out, the story goes that he was charging one of these machine gun nests, and he was zigzagging as he was running up the field with his men still behind the embankment. And he got relatively far, but he got shot. He got shot in the chest and he fell to the ground. And you can imagine the concussive force of being shot by a machine gun, especially in the middle of battle. He fell to the ground, and what ended up happening was nothing less than a miracle. He collected himself, grabbed his helmet, put it back on, and got up and continued to charge into machine gun fire. Now, if it was me, I don't know if I would have charged in the first place. But after I got shot, I would have probably just stayed on the ground. Okay, I'm good. Everybody else now do your job. I was a good leader and demonstrated what you're supposed to do. But Sergeant Antolak, he didn't let that hold him back. He got up and continued to charge with this great resolve. And his men were so inspired that they began to move out into the field following their leader. So he began to continue his advance towards the enemy, and we read that he got hit again a second time. He went down. I would imagine frustration settling in. I would imagine probably his breath being taken away, got shot in the chest again. And that didn't hold him back. He got up and continued to fight and fire on the enemy and zigzag and charge at that embankment where all those machine guns were and all those Germans were. Well, it wasn't before long, as he's getting closer and closer, he got shot a third time. This time he got shot in his right arm, in his shooting arm. So he goes to the ground. And I think at that point, after getting shot 3 times, I'm gonna stay down. There's no way I can get back up. My right arm is shot up. I got shot in the chest a couple of times. I can't hardly breathe. I'm having a hard time. I'm gonna let my crew, I'm gonna let my guys take over. But not Sergeant Antolak. He gets up a third time, jams his machine gun under his left hand, and with a shout, he advances all the way, shooting his way in to this nest of machine guns. And those who were in the battle that day, those Germans, were scared out of their mind. They were watching this single American GI advance, get shot not once, not twice, but 3 times, and each time getting up and getting closer to them. They thought he was some sort of ghost. They were scared, and by the time he got close enough, they all surrendered in that moment. They gave up. They're like, we give up, we give up. And he took over, and they became prisoners. It was so amazing. And his men finally caught up to him, and they were amazed, and they couldn't believe it. And because of his courage that day, not only did he save the men who were pinned down on that open field, but he made a way for his soldiers to follow him, and they ended up capturing that. Well, it wasn't but a minute after they captured this that he was already determined, mortally wounded, determined to go on to the next one on their flank. And so he began to charge his men. No, Sergeant, just relax. We'll get the medics over here to take care of you. He couldn't. He was determined. There was so much courage in his heart that day that he could not stop, even though he was wounded. So he eventually, he ran towards that next group of machine guns. And after about 30 yards, the story goes that he fell to the ground and succumbed to his wounds. But as his men watched him move to that second embankment where those machine guns were, there was something that set fire to their hearts. That courage from Antolak set fire to their hearts and gave them such a determination that that was a pivoting moment of the war, that they were able to capture all of the Germans in that vicinity and capture that Cisterna town and make a way for the waves of soldiers and troops coming in to advance on Rome. That moment was a turning point in the war, and it was a turning point in history, all because of this young sergeant, 28 years old, gave his life because of the courage that was in his heart. And it changed the direction of history. And I want to encourage you, just like Jonathan that day back when the Israelites were fighting their enemies, that created a turning point and changed history. And I don't want you to think small about your life. I don't want you to think small about the courage that God has put in your heart or the dreams that God has put before you. But I want to encourage you today that you can make one decision as Jesus is showing you and allow courage to rise up. Courage doesn't mean that we don't have fear, right? But because we choose to be courageous, it means that we're not going to let fear stop us. And so I want to bless you as we celebrate Memorial Day weekend together with our families and with maybe reaching out to some of our military friends, I want to encourage you to allow courage to settle into your heart. And what are those things, or what are those dreams, or what are those opportunities that God's putting in front of you? And allow courage to help you blow through and blow past fear. And know that the decisions that you're making is going to make a way for people behind you. The courage that you're walking in is inspiring courage in your coworkers, or inspiring courage in your boss, inspiring courage in your kids, or in your friends or family.